Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. You know, there's a saying out there that you'd rather be lucky than good. And in a way, that's exactly where we're at this week with our guest. Yesterday, Isuzu and Gatik announced that they are going to work together on medium mile or middle mile autonomous trucks. That means that they're going to build them together and they're going to sell them around 2027, thereabouts. Isuzu, whose parent is in Japan, is also going to invest $30 million in Gatik, which is a pretty nice infusion of cash. And it will push them a little farther out there in that leadership position that Gatik has in the short haul or middle mile business-to-business work. We caught up with Sean Skinner, who is the CEO of Isuzu, recently and had a chance to talk about Gatik a little bit and other things. Sean, welcome to the show.
Alan, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I think this is just, first of all, I promised that I would do at least one softball question, and I will. Across 40 years, you guys have established leadership in a couple of places in the medium duty space. And I don't know how that would fare as a bar question, to win a bar bet. But the fact is, you have somehow done this, and I'm just going to give you a chance to tell me how you did it.
Well, thank you for starting out easy, get my legs underneath me here. I don't think it's overly complicated. Sometimes the equations aren't as complicated as people want to make them seem. First of all, you've got to have a quality product, and it all starts there. If you don't, I think people will see you for the fraud that you probably are and move on. But you've got to have that, and I think our company has always been able to provide a high-quality product. Additionally, you've got to take care of the customers, and you've got to partner up with your dealers to make sure that you, along with your dealers, can make the customer experience as strong as possible. So we've treated our dealers from the outset like partners, like they should be, and we make sure that the customer experience, between the things that we work on and that we work with them on, is as strong as it can be.
I look at, I come out of General Motors. I spent 20 years there between two journalism careers and worked in media relations. And of course, I was familiar with some of the early work that was done in Janesville, Wisconsin, when that plant was running for Isuzu. But you've actually had your presence in North America in terms of manufacturing presence for how long now?
It was the mid 90s that we started producing I think it was 95 or 94 that we started producing or assembling, I should say, the gas truck with the assistance of General Motors. And that was the first endeavor into doing assembly here in North America. That ran through about 2009 in Janesville, during the period of time where I think GM went through some challenges. And then we restarted assembly here in the U.S. in Charlotte, Michigan, in 2011, and have been there since.
And working with what was then known as Spartan Motors and now the Shift Group, or one of their subsidiaries, it's interesting because I'm located just an hour or so from there. Haven't been there, but I'm hoping that by the time we're fast friends at the end of this, you'll invite me to visit over there, or I'll just call Shift and ask them. But
I think I'd like to visit you there in Charlotte, because I think know to pronounce it correctly as you're there.
And nobody knows on this call anyway why they pronounce it that way, but we respect that they do.
Yes.
The Detroit automakers, speaking of them, especially Ford, they all play in the medium duty space, to some extent. And of course, the larger commercial players like Daimler Truck and PACCAR and Navistar, and most recently Mack, all have a presence in that Class 6 and 7 space.
Yes.
How has the growth in the number of competitors changed your strategy or your approach to this market?
That's a really good question. And there's a couple of facets to it. Number one, we believe that our product does have some unique features. And really the main characteristic is the low cab forward design, where you can put a larger body on the truck and actually have a smaller footprint, or, have the same size body and a smaller footprint, more maneuverable, more of an urban style truck. So we feel in many ways that we have something that's uniquely different than some of the other competitors, because they all have what we would call a conventional cab. So it allows us to try and maybe, I would say, segregate to some degree the customer base and vocations that we're going after. The other thing too is that we kind of work from a position up into Class 6 and 7 from our N series being in classes 3 through 5. And typically they work down from their Class 8 product into that. So what that allows us to do is focus on customers that may have more of what I'll call a light, medium, and a medium duty need, so they can kind of keep the same product lineup throughout. So they can have Isuzus in their class 4 and 5 if they need, and in their 6 and 7. So we can provide more of that light, medium, and medium duty need, and have customers that can be familiar with us and have scale with us versus having to kind of break it up. So I think it's kind of the customer type we're after, from vocation, the way the truck operates in very well in urban environments, and sometimes the characteristic of the other products that the customer is utilizing.
Yeah. You set records in deliveries and in part sales in 2023, more than any of your 40-year history, which of course we're, kind of raising a glass to here. But all of those are records in the U.S. Now that we're getting, and I guess I had this question partly framed up before I looked at that, and the question ran around the idea: did the exit, if you will, of Mitsubishi Fuso sort of help that along and get you to where you got to at the end of last year? That's part one, and I'll.
Okay, well, part one, yeah, to some degree, it would be hard to say that it didn't help a little bit. Fuso was, a player in the class 3 through 5 cab forward segment, and towards the end they only had gas product only. Also, and I think some are aware, Hino has, now effectively left the class 4 and 5 segment. Also, for a period of time, we were Isuzu overall was selling the product that was rebadged as a Hino in class 4 and 5, but their volumes were off of where they were at historically, like up until about 2019. So with both of those players being somewhat absent from the cab forward class 3 through 5 or 4 and 5 segment, those are customers that we're certainly going to go after. And if they see the advantages of the cab forward product, the advantages it bring, like I said, maneuverability, visibility, you can put the same size box and have smaller footprint. Those are customers that we believe can help us grow our volume in the segment without question.
Okay, so part two comes to Fuso's back. At least it's back as a Rizon badged medium duty 4 and 5 electric only at this point. We're going to get to electrification in a moment. As that part of the market, class 3 to 5, really is the part that probably pencils out easiest in terms of cost of ownership, acquisition, and then presumably lower maintenance costs. So they're starting to get a lot of noise in that space about that. I guess I'm wondering, do you see that return, albeit as electric only, being a factor in holding your dominant share position?
In this, you never want to take any competition lightly, Alan. So we're always going to be, a bit paranoid. What was the, there's that quote, you got to always be. I always say there's a quote from, the founder of Intel. It's success breeds complacency. Complacency breeds failure. Only the paranoid survive. So,
That's
we're
the whole quote, huh?
Yeah.
I only know the paranoid surviving part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I like to instill that in our team. So you never want to take anything lightly, but I think that what we're looking towards and that what our hope is we attack the marketplace. We have been, even when Fuso was in the marketplace, our market share within the segment was dominant. And so you have a lot of the customer base that is out there using either our gas trucks or diesel trucks right now. And those that are in California that will have a requirement due to ACF regulations, those companies that have, decarbonization goals that they have that are using our product, we feel that those are going to be great, I would say, prospects for us right now. And so as we're able to transition them from the product that's Isuzu right now that they're using, it won't be unfamiliar for them to move into the EV. The propulsion system will be different, but it'll be a similar truck to what they're using. So body configuration, which is oftentimes one of the most critical parts of the truck to them, is not going to change dramatically. The service that they're getting from us, the network of 300 dealers here in the US and 30 in Canada that we have available to them, the service will be done through that. We have a great network that they're familiar with that will be able to provide them the backup of that. So the ownership experience, we believe, overall, when you add all that together, is going to play to our advantage because they're familiar with Isuzu, they're using our product now, and to get them into that, it doesn't mean that they have to, make a transition into something new and different, which is a little bit of an unknown to them.
Well, there certainly is some adjustment to driving an electric truck. How quickly do you see your portfolio of what you assemble and sell here moving into that space? Because again, where we're seeing growth in electric trucks is exactly where you sell them. I mean, in those areas.
Yeah, I would think that we have somewhat of a target-rich environment. I think that you're going to have some, I think we all know that there's going to be some infrastructure delays and things like that. When I think some of these customers look at what they have to do to their depots and whatnot, it may be a little bit more complex than some know. Some are already very educated and know what they have going on. I think that we're probably going to see, logically, some of the states that are adopting ACT, Advanced Clean Truck, and, California really leading, I always say this, leading the charge, no pun intended, along the electrification lines, that we're going to see a lot of that transition that's going to be regulatory driven. I think you're also going to have well-capitalized companies that have a lot of units in the fleet that they think longer term decarbonization is important to them, but they also believe that in the end, that they'll be able to get a better cost per mile out of an electric vehicle versus internal combustion. So I think that the transition in the early phases is probably going to be a little bit slower based on the way that we're reading some things with GHG phase 3 that EPA just announced, here recently. I think that's going to accelerate things because there's going to be some requirements on everyone to probably get moving a little bit quicker on all that. But I think for at least the foreseeable future, let's say the next several years, I think internal combustion engines are still going to be the vast majority of our business, and we're going to be able to start to ramp up towards the electrification. But I don't think it's going to be just like the flick of a light switch and all of a sudden everybody's going to make that transition. There's a lot of effort that's going to have to go into it. A lot of customers are going to have to put their infrastructures in place, not just the power companies and everything, but these customers being ready to be able to, power their vehicles up, power them overnight. And that doesn't happen, real quickly. There's a lot of effort that's going to be put in.
Most of the 3 to 5 or 3 and 4 anyway, electric trucks tend to be behind the fence charging. They can even, if they're returned to base, they can stay at AC current. They don't have to go to direct current charging. So a little easier, and you don't have those weights that the utilities and switchgear and all the rest of it that goes into electrification.
Yeah,
you don't have to deal as much with that. I am curious, Shift being your contract manufacturer, they're actually starting to have some pretty good success with their own Blue Arc product. They just got a pretty good deal. Did you see, and I didn't have this in my list, so it really not gotcha. But did you see potentially maybe, using perhaps if they would be okay with that and they want to sell it to you, would you see maybe going to their they did their own ground up platform, their own skateboard for the Blue Arc. Would you see going to something like that, to maybe if you do see this pick up, as if it's going to pick up anywhere, it's in your area?
Right. I would say, in the short term, probably not, because if you look at our portfolio, really most of our sales come from class 4 and 5 for the N series. And our N series EV we're doing as a class 5 only product because of the fact that we want to make sure that if we do equip it with 180 kilowatt, which would be 9 of the 20 kilowatt hour battery packs, that there is, what we consider to be a very useful payload. And, that goes all the way down to 60 kilowatt hours. So we have a variety of packages that we offer. We're more into what I would consider to be kind of the commercial application for that. The Blue Arc product, I think that you're referring to, is more of a van, a skateboard, probably a little bit lighter duty. So, in down the road, potentially, I'll never rule anything out. But I think at least for what we see right now, as far as, what our, I think, direction is, and really where we're putting our focus is, we're focusing on those customers that need probably a bit more of a robust vehicle, not like a Eurovan style or, walk-in van style. We're going after more of that commercial truck segment that we've played in forever. And that's where our focus is at this point in time.
It's funny. We see so many startups now, and most of them are focused on the step van space, Motive and gosh, there's others they're not coming to my head right now, but you know who they are. But one of the competitors, if you will, it might be too strong a term to use, mentioned recently that, they've got a, ground up, commercial electric vehicle, and that you were retrofitting. You kind of told me off camera that maybe that doesn't matter so much. You want to explain?
I think if you look at the basic design of their product, is that it is a cab forward cab, very similar to ours. It's body on frame construction. So the reality is, it's just how do you place the batteries into it? How do you work the propulsion system around? So to say, it's kind of like saying, well, because we only have electric propulsion or electric motor propulsion system, it's a ground up design. Really, it's basic elements, it's DNA. Without the propulsion system is the same as ours. When you look at ours, I believe that in many ways, there's a couple things here, not to get off the script too much, but we've really done, I think, an excellent job of making sure that we provide a product that fits the customer's needs. And we didn't go with just like a single design on the battery packs. You can have a 60 kilowatt battery pack, 100 kilowatt hour, 140 and 180. And off camera, I told you, kind of that one of our dealers always says, you can't, with building a truck, you can't, he equates it to a church. You can't build a church for just Christmas and Easter. It'll be overbuilt for 363 days out of the year, if that's the case. So in our case, if somebody doesn't need 180 kilowatt hours of, potential, the battery rating, and they only need 60 because they're going to just be doing maybe yard, work in a small yard, maybe it's a ground support equipment at an airport, then they don't need to pay for the extra. And, the batteries are the most expensive part of it. So to say that ours is maybe at a deficit because it's not really designed from the ground up to be that, I think that we've built a great deal of flexibility into it to allow it to fit what those customers' needs are. And the other thing that I would say to that point is, I don't necessarily think coming in with something that would be revolutionary in our industry would be helpful to the customers either, because they're going to have to operate electric vehicles in many cases at the same time they're operating ICE vehicles. And if it, for example, is a beverage company and they have a specific design on their beverage body that goes on our truck, in some cases that may be to them the most important part of the vehicle. And having it on something that's similar to what we're building now means that they don't need to make a lot of designs to their actual body, which is where the production comes from on the vehicle. And so that allows them to have the variable of having to transition to electrification being probably enough of a stress to them to try and make that transition, let alone trying to rethink what the body should look like on the vehicle. So the pieces of it they get to continue to use. And I think that will evolve as we can find ways to make the truck more efficient and effective in the ways that you use electrification to probably, bring ride height down if you can, and things like that, in a more robust commercial rated vehicle. But I think as we find ways that we can make the vehicle more usable, it'll be an evolution. But at least in the beginning, I think being able to provide them with something that's similar to what they have now, but offers them some level of flexibility, but doesn't require a ton of changes like on their application, I think to me is the most logical way to move forward.
I was going to ask you, but I don't think I'm going to unless you want to weigh in on it. I was going to ask you, for the startups in the electric van and truck space, what advice would you give them if you had advice to give? They didn't ask, I did, but
I would probably jokingly say no advice would be given, because you don't ever want to provide anybody, a competitor advice. I think friendly advice, would be that don't bring anything out until you know that you can have a quality product to put in front of the customer. Because as our parents always told us, you don't have a second chance to make a good first impression. And you better be sure that you have everything, not just able to sell the product to somebody, but you've got everything buttoned up, because really where you're going to earn your keep is when that thing has its first problem. And if it has a lot of downtime on it, you're going to leave a bad taste in that customer's mouth. And so I think that's one of the things that we understand the medium duty customer very well, whether it be class 3 through 5 with our N series or class 6 and 7 with our F series product. And I think that we understand, downtime and making the truck as seamless to the customer as you possibly can is an integral part, probably the most critical part of success in that area. So you've got to make sure that it's not just, hey, we think we have the best technology. You got to have the whole package.
Okay, two more areas before our time, believe it or not, is already running low. I
told you that'd be the biggest
much.
challenge.
Well, so you did say that, and I
Yeah.
said it was my job to be the timekeeper. But I've got two more for you. That is, Isuzu Commercial is providing to Gatik the, I believe, Class 7 truck, the F Series, for their medium, their middle mile autonomous work.
Yes.
What have you learned? This is more than just a supply agreement. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. First of all, just to be clear, we do provide them some Class 6 product also, but it's just the differences are minor, just from a weight rating and some of the springs and stuff. But to that point, yeah, I think that there was a lot of talk about autonomy, and I think a lot of people look at it as final mile autonomy and things like that. That's even more complicated. What we're looking at with them is mid-mile autonomy, where you can use a straight truck. And mid-mile means that you're probably operating between depots. And let's just make it really simple. Let's say you have two depots that you've got to send the truck between. It goes from A to B and B to A. Making that type of move is a lot easier than having an infinite number of moves that it has to make in final mile. So I think everybody feels that if we're going to have a frontier that we're going to be able to crack the code on it initially, it's going to be business to business or mid-mile autonomy that makes the most sense. You can eliminate small tractors and things like that. Like you said, moving to Class 7, you can send the truck, if you get to the point that you're level 4 and you're driverless, you can have it where you can have it going back and forth on numerous trips and probably have quite a savings, because you won't have to have a licensed driver for a tractor trailer or a small, maybe city tractor, something along those lines. So we believe that the straight truck has great capabilities and great, I would say, potential for that mid-mile autonomy. And coupling up with us with, again, the cab forward design, bigger body, the truck's a bit more maneuverable. So from Gatik's perspective, I'm sure if you spoke to them, they'd feel that our truck is a great match for their technology. So we have been working with them, and we're trying to, as time wears on, engineer some of the issues that would make their systems work more efficiently, and how do we engineer that into our trucks as we look at production in the future. So yeah, it has been something that we are working towards here in North America with them, kind of an alliance to work with them on supplying them with product, but also trying to find ways that it helps us along too.
Well, we didn't talk about your main competitor. We really don't have time to talk about Ford today. But it's interesting in the autonomous space that Gatik thus far hasn't really attracted any meaningful competition in that middle mile space. And yet it wasn't very long ago now that Daimler said, you know what, we've got an autonomous platform with torque and we've got an electric truck. So I guess we're waiting to see what's going to happen. They have a Class 6 truck as well and Class 7 in the EM2. So it'll be interesting to see, but I presume that your F Series is electrified. Or no, you said that's just a Class 5 version. So
correct. So we right now we will be starting assembly or production of our N Series EV, and that will start this summer. And we are doing some testing of F Series EV. We've published that we have some in operation, but we have not announced at this point, start of production of that vehicle.
Will that come out of Charlotte, Sean?
Since we haven't announced anything, that would be an unknown at this point.
Okay. So you need to invite me wherever that is. I want to see
and
it.
I was going to say, you know what, maybe this will make for a good round 2 for you and I to get together.
That'd be awesome. Happy to meet you wherever that is. Listen, we are just about out of time, but I can't let you out of here without talking about a very fun execution. You did it a couple of years ago. Now you have a new version, and that's your craft beer truck.
Yes.
Let's talk about parties.
You know what? It's something we do well. We like to have fun as a distributor, and I'm going to have to give full credit on the beer truck. By the way, if it was an ice cream truck or a donut truck, I would take credit for it, but it's not. It's a beer truck. So Brian Tobble, our Assistant Vice President of Marketing, this was his baby, and it was born out of, I think, I'd like to say maybe too many trips, but he thinks about the right number of trips to some of the breweries here in the local area. And he was with one of the craft brewers here that he visits occasionally, and started talking to him about some of their needs for trucks. And they kind of concepted this idea where I call it where it works at pour parties. You can have those parties, but you can also, haul in it. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 that you can do both. And I have to tell you, it's not our number one volume truck or anywhere close to it, but it creates more attention And Brian and I like to call it kind of a halo image truck. If it kind of creates this interest and I think a lot of fun for people. And it's probably very indicative of our personality as a company. So it suits us well in many ways. It creates a lot of attention, and we certainly have a lot of fun with it. And not only do they do beer out of it, but sometimes they'll do nitro brew coffee if you need a hit of caffeine.
Okay, well, I'm struggling with what that line is about, business in the front, party in the back, or whatever. But you've got
Yeah,
it all in one truck here, so
we do.
that's cool. And I congratulate you on that. And again, Sean, happy anniversary, 40th anniversary at Isuzu Commercial North America. Thanks for being here and for sharing some insights with us.
Appreciate the time, Alan.
Well, folks, Isuzu is it's a fun company. We ended talking about beer trucks. I mean, and not just delivering beer, but pouring beer. So this is pretty cool. Thanks again to Sean for being with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.